Hey, thanks so much for the introduction. So, as Samantha already said, I'm going to be talking about the Great Rationing and where supply chains are currently failing and how Web3 is here to help. My name is Leia. I have been with Centrifuge about 2 years now, where I lead product partnerships. And basically what I do is I help asset originators finance their assets via our protocol via DeFi, the decentralized financial ecosystem. There's a Q&A afterwards, but if you see this video later, feel free to reach out to me anytime by email. So I'm going to take a look at supply chains. And I believe on an average day, the average person probably spends 0 time thinking about supply chain efficiencies. The only other hiccups that we've experienced is probably Cyber Monday or when the new iPhone comes out. But besides that, not so much. And just recently, we have been confronted with a really different picture. So I think everyone is familiar with empty shelves in supermarkets, no toilet paper to be found, and suddenly huge queues in front of supermarkets, not just in the physical store, but also online. And besides toilet paper that we were lacking, there was also huge hiccups in the supply chain for medical supplies, such as face masks and ventilators. And I'm going to take a look at some of these reasons that caused these. So if you take a look at supply chains, they are extremely complex global chains that connect millions of businesses of all sizes around the globe. So this is an extremely simplified overview of how a supply chain can look like. So here you have a shoe manufacturer. Shoe manufacturer needs laces. Laces needs fabric. Fabric needs cotton. So, and if you follow down that path, a simple supply chain can go down to 40 tiers really fast, really easily, and with 0 to or very limited visibility to the top tiers, what actually is going down in the lower tiers of the supply chain. And if one link fails, it can have really drastic impacts. And during the pandemic, there definitely have been businesses that have profited from that situation. I've just mentioned online supermarkets, but also streaming services, etc. But I'm really going to focus on those many businesses that have suffered throughout this when the pandemic started, and where COVID-19 really has been representing a black swan for their supply chain and manufacturing. So I've said, if one link in the supply chain fails, it can have severe impacts. What if really key suppliers are down? So in Wuhan, where the pandemic started, this entire city has been in complete lockdown, shutdown for several months. And Wuhan is also often considered as the world's factory. So more than 200 of the Fortune 500 companies have their presence there. And imagine now these key suppliers are down. To combat the spread of the virus, a lot of shops have been closing down. Unfortunately, a lot of people had been laid off, which resulted in sporadic sales in stores. On the other hand, we had these rational but also irrational demand surges. So on the one hand, I said there was an increased demand for medical supplies, but then also people were just stocking up on toilet paper and flour, yeast, etc. And an average supply chain is really designed for the average demand because it's so costly to design for the peak demands. And to be able, for those businesses to be able to cope with this situation, to on the one hand ramp up production, or also stabilize the inventory, financial support is more crucial than ever. And at Centrifuge, we love to show the slide because we always highlight the size of the issue of optimizing your cash flow. So for B2B, the nirvana is really to get paid on time. It's just like when the money hits my bank account. And on an average, the average time that a company has to wait until they actually get paid is usually 60 days. So 60 days, which can extend to easily 4 to 5 months. And this is the waiting period until you get paid. But really, in the meantime, you have to pay your staff, you have to pay for production, etc. There are companies already out there, or like actually 30 years in the making, there have been solutions that try to cater this need that is already there, Corona unrelated. There's supply chain finance, there's factoring. But these solutions really only cover 2% of the actual need. And if you look at this huge bubble, it's 180 trillion, which is the global B2B spend. These are the invoices that float around between businesses and payments that need to be optimized. And with, on a normal day, only 2% being covered by existing solutions, now take the Corona pandemic, and the issue is increased tremendously. These solutions that I mentioned are also, most of the time, they only extend to businesses to like tier 1, sometimes tier 2. They are very exclusive, and for smaller businesses, they actually can get really expensive or are not accessible in the first place. And what happens now during COVID is what we've seen, that there is even less flexibility. So a lot of manufacturers shift from open books to advanced payments. So oftentimes, if you have long-lasting relationships and you usually have maybe 50% upfront, get paid by your buyer, and then the rest of the 50% you get paid until when the cargo leaves the warehouse. Now, to be able to mitigate risk, more and more manufacturers are actually asking for more advanced payments. With its existing solutions, even if you have a perfect balance sheets, you sometimes just really don't fit the criteria. And now, more than ever, the trust in companies has deteriorated, and banks are withdrawing the lines of credit. Just like, I think 4 weeks ago, Deutsche Bank downgraded GM because they have around 15 weeks of cash until they have problems to operate. And GM is a Fortune 500 company. And now just think of the small to medium businesses that also are in need for financing. And there are solutions out there, or there are solutions being created, but this is really the relationships that you already have become more essential than ever. So cash, there is really a need for flexible cash that is accessible to anyone. And this is exactly where Web3 is coming in, and where the structure fits so perfectly. So what I mentioned earlier, DeFi, a decentralized financial ecosystem, is built on open, decentralized infrastructure with no built-in gatekeepers. So it's really accessible for everyone. And what we've also seen during this Corona pandemic, an industry that is so heavily reliant on the physical presence and physical goods such as paper, where people really need to show up on ports to verify the ownership of the cargo. This is really a flawed system. This is a system that has not been innovated for more than 400 years. So with blockchain technology, it is possible to uniquely identify the status of a document and help prevent, or like help this use case, for example. Bankless lending. So there is really a need for alternative sources of liquidity, or liquidity that solutions that operate out of the norm of current financial institutions. So with solutions in DeFi, instead of having to go through the entire trouble with a bank, you can actually, instead of a bank lending money to or extending money to you, a smart contract can do that. More liquidity. What the beauty of blockchain is really that you can automate processes, and you can make financial tools from the traditional financial sector available to more people. One example here that I will go in a little bit more into detail is securitization. For example, if structured properly, this is really a great tool for freeing up liquidity and optimizing risk allocation, and it's oftentimes only reserved for bigger companies because it's so cumbersome and costly. And all these things that I've mentioned now, this is really what Centrifuge has been working towards, and what our application Centrifuge TinLake is built for. What we do is we help so-called asset originators bring their assets that they have, such as invoices, warehouse receipts, purchase orders on-chain, tokenize these, sort of fingerprint these documents, and have them represented as so-called NFTs, so non-fungible tokens. And this is really the gateway for companies to access DeFi. And as the DeFi ecosystem mostly for now works with fungible assets, we built TinLake, which is our securitization protocol, where these unique assets that you now have on chain, where you pull these assets, bundle them, and mint fungible ERC20 tokens on top of it, that they can now be plugged into decentralized liquidity providers, such as lending protocols such as Maker, for example. This is our tech stack. So we have our peer-to-peer messaging protocol. This is where businesses exchange their documents in a private and secure way. On top of that, we've built our Centrifuge chain, which holds the single source of truth for all parties. So we work with anchors that allows these businesses to tokenize their documents and have them represented in NFTs. On top of that, we built TinLake, which I just mentioned, and other applications can be built on top and plugged into DeFi. And this is a little bit more into detail how our securitization protocol works. So you have invoices, for example. They are bundled together in a TinLake pool. Based on that, you have two types of ERC20 tokens are minted. So we have the drop token, which is our senior tranche, and you have the tin token, which is our junior tranche. And the two of them are interest-bearing tokens, but they work a little bit differently. So the drop token is a token that gives investors a stable return, and it's also risk, or it's first loss protected by the tin token. So the tin token has the potential of higher yield, but it also takes the first loss. And whenever so investors can pay into a TinLake pool depending on their risk appetite, and the borrower on the other side gets paid out in cryptocurrency such as DAI. And whenever an invoice, for example, is paid back, first the drop investors are paid back, and then the tin investors. And this really is a great tool to help businesses unlock liquidity in a risk optimized way. We are not just building this in theory, but we've actually been financing several pools so far. We are working with several asset originators. One of them is Freight, which is a technology provider for freight forwarders, and they help freight forwarders unlock or advance payments to the stakeholders that are involved in global trade. And on the other hand, we have the liquidity provider. We have Maker, which is a decentralized stablecoin. And the way it works currently is that you lock crypto assets as collateral in this protocol, and in return receive DAI. We are currently working with Freight. We're currently in the governance process of locking freight invoices into Maker to extend, basically to have a decentralized line of credit for Freight. Our first TinLake pool is live. You can visit us on tinlake.centrifuge.io, and and take a look. In June, there are more to come. We currently have Console Freight Series 1 live. The Series 2 is coming, and we'll also be going to be live with Paperchain, another asset originator that facilitates payments for streaming invoices, and more to come. We really think that the financial infrastructure is ripe for innovation, and that we just need to dismantle it and like strip it down to the basics and reassemble it for making the supply chain just more resilient for more for the next shakeups that are going to come. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.